My own sister handed me her dirty laundry and said the maid will take care of it. I was the maid. But what none of them knew was that I owned the resort they were standing in. My name's Emma Thompson. I'm 35 and I'm standing dead center in the middle of a luxury resort up in Lake Tahoe. You know the kind, tall pine trees stretching forever, a breeze that smells like money, and chandeliers in the lobby so big they make you feel like you walked into someone else's dream. This place is old money meets new Instagram. And every year, like clockwork, the Thompson family shows up in matching luggage and louder opinion. And I do too, of course, but not as someone they see. See, I'm not the kind of woman who needs attention. I've got a career that excites me. I build rail systems, real ones. High speed, complex, beautiful engineering that moves entire cities. I've worked damn hard for every ounce of respect I've earned in my field. But when I'm around my husband's family, none of that seems to matter. To them, I'm just James's quiet little wife, the one who does something with computers, as his mom likes to say while waving me off like I'm an unpaid intern at Thanksgiving. They don't ask what I do, they never have. They forget I don't eat pork, even though I remind them every year. They talk over me at dinner, ask me to refill wine glasses I'm not even drinking from, and somehow always assume I know where the napkins are. And maybe the saddest part is, I let them. I swallowed it. Bit my tongue through 1,000 tiny cuts, told myself it wasn't worth it to rock the boat. I told myself I was just being polite, being the bigger person, being good. But something about this year felt different. Not in a big thunderclap kind of way, more like the way the ground slowly shifts under your feet, and you don't realize you're falling until you already hit the floor. It started with the smallest things. Margaret calling me the help under her breath when I handed her a plate. One of James's cousins asking if I was the new event planner. Then someone actually left their laundry in a basket outside my door with a note that said, "Can you take care of this?" That was the moment. Not a scream, not a fight, just a note, scribbled like I was staff. And I stood there, holding that basket, knowing they didn't see me, not really, not as family, not even as a person, just something convenient, disposable. But here's the part they don't know. While they were treating me like I was part of the cleaning crew, I was sitting on a deal that would change everything. See, a few years back, the original owners of this resort had hit financial trouble, quietly, discreetly. They were looking for a buyer, someone who could keep the place running without stirring up gossip. And I had the money, the connections, the desire to build something of my own. So I bought it. I bought the whole damn resort, every fireplace, every doorman, every log cabin suite with overpriced wine and towel swans on the bed. I kept it under wraps because I wanted to do it right. I didn't want fanfare. I just wanted to own something that mattered to me. I wanted to take up space in a way they couldn't ignore. But now I'm done hiding. I've spent too many summers pretending I was lucky to be invited when I was the one holding the door open. This year, I didn't just RSVP, I rewrote the guest list. I'm not just staying at this resort, I run it. I picked the wines they're drinking. I set the price they paid without a discount. I made sure the rooms didn't have bacon in the breakfast buffet just to see who would notice. And when the Thompsons find out who really owns this place, well, I hope someone has their phone ready, because it's going to be one hell of a scene. Let me take you back. James and I have been married for nearly 11 years now. He's a professor, brilliant in his field, quiet in a thoughtful way, and kind in the small things. He'll carry in the groceries without being asked, remember how I like my coffee, leave sticky notes on my laptop that say, "You've got this." But when it comes to his family, he disappears. Not physically, emotionally. Every time they crossed a line, he'd freeze up, look away, pretend not to hear. He'd shrink back instead of standing up, and that more than anything was the beginning of the hurt. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. They didn't mean it. Maybe I was being sensitive. Maybe that's just how rich people are: brash, entitled, clueless. The first time it stung was when James brought me to their house for Thanksgiving. After dinner, while the other wives sipped wine and chatted by the fire, Margaret clapped her hands and said, "Emma, would you mind clearing the plates?" I did it, thinking it was just a one-time thing. It wasn't. Every holiday after that, I somehow became the default cleanup crew. Nobody asked Lauren or Sarah or Becca to help. Just me. Always me. I felt like the unpaid waitress at a country club I didn't apply to join. It wasn't just the chores. It was the way Margaret introduced me to her friends as James's wife from some engineering school out west, like I'd crawled out of a community college with a part-time degree. I graduated with honors from the University of Washington, thank you very much. I worked 2 jobs to put myself through school. I built my own path, brick by brick, but none of that mattered to them. They saw my plain dresses, my quiet voice, my habit of listening more than talking, and labeled me sweet but basic. Like being kind made me forgettable. Like being practical made me invisible. James would hear the comments. He wasn't deaf, but instead of standing up, he'd squeeze my hand gently and whisper, "They don't mean it." But they did. Every word, every whisper, every smug smile that followed one of their backhanded compliments. And every time he stayed silent, it chipped away at something inside me, a kind of sadness I didn't even know how to name yet. I still tried, though. I showed up. I brought wine. I smiled through dinner. I offered to help with parties, to be part of the family. When James's dad retired, I took charge of the whole celebration, booked the venue, printed the invites, arranged catering, even made a photo slideshow that made half the room cry. And when Lauren got up to give her toast, she thanked James, their cousin Mark, their Aunt Brenda, literally everyone who didn't do a thing. My name wasn't even mentioned. James leaned in afterward, kissed my cheek, and said, "You know you did most of it." I smiled, nodded, and died a little inside. What good was being seen by him if he wouldn't help them see me too? It became a pattern, a cycle. They'd belittle me, he'd pacify me, I'd swallow the pain, rinse and repeat. I started shrinking, started questioning myself, started wondering if maybe I was the problem. Maybe I wasn't polished enough for them, as Margaret once whispered to James when she thought I couldn't hear. Maybe my clearance frac dress wasn't elegant enough. Maybe my job in engineering didn't sound as glamorous as James, the brilliant professor. I tried harder. I cooked for them. I hosted Christmas twice. I sent birthday cards and baby gifts and always showed up with a smile. I gave more than I ever got back, and yet, somehow, I was still the outsider, the help, the extra. One night, after yet another awkward family dinner, James's cousin Sarah clinked her glass, smiled at me and said, "It's impressive you've lasted this long. Most people who marry into this family fade out," like it was a compliment. Like I should feel proud for not being chewed up and spat out. I smiled back, but that night I sat on the shower floor and cried, as quietly as I could. I didn't want James to hear. I didn't want him to feel guilty for something he wouldn't change. That's the thing about slow burn disrespect. It wears you down before you even realize what's happening. And by the time you notice, you're already exhausted from trying to prove your worth to people who never wanted to see it in the first place. Margaret's jabs weren't always loud. Sometimes it was just the way she'd glance at my shoes and say, "How practical," in a tone that felt like acid. Sometimes it was how they'd plan group family photos and I'd find out I wasn't in them. Sometimes it was the way James would go silent when I looked to him for backup. A whole decade of showing up, fitting in, giving all of myself, and still, I was the outsider, the plus one, the invisible maid in my own life. And somewhere along the way, I stopped hoping they'd see me. I started wondering what it would feel like if they had no choice but to. So I stopped trying to win them over. I stopped shrinking myself to fit into their narrow idea of who I should be. I poured my time and focus into something that didn't belittle me, my work. Every ounce of energy I had been wasting trying to get a smile from Margaret or a thank you from Lauren, I channeled into my career. And not just my day job. On the side, I started investing. Quietly, no flashy moves, no announcements on social media, just small, smart steps. I built a portfolio, a little at a time. 7 years ago, I helped launch a private investment fund, anonymous on paper, but something I was deeply involved in. We focused on boutique hotels, small properties with potential. It was just business at first. Clean numbers, good returns, no emotion. But that changed last summer. We were back at this resort, same pine trees, same fake niceties. During dinner, James's uncle looked right at me and joked, "Emma's surprisingly handy for someone who doesn't come from money." Everyone laughed, loudly, even James. I smiled, clenched my teeth so tight my jaw hurt for days. But I stayed quiet. Because I always stayed quiet. Later that night, I was walking past Margaret's room and heard her on the phone. She was talking to someone about me. I'll never forget the way her voice dipped into that cold, soft cruelty she saves for moments like these. "She's harmless, sweet, but she'll never be one of us. You can just tell by the way she carries herself." That was it. That sentence hit me harder than any slap. It was the moment something broke inside me and made space for something new, something strong. I stopped caring what they thought. I didn't want their approval anymore. I wanted power. I called an old colleague who had moved into hotel acquisitions. 4 months later, I made an offer on the very resort they worshipped, the one they bragged about on Instagram every summer, the one they said was too exclusive for most people. It cost me nearly everything I had saved over the years, every bonus, every investment return, but I didn't hesitate. Not for a second. I wanted it not to flaunt it, but to own something they respected. Something they never in a million years would expect to be connected to me. The deal was quiet, just like I wanted. Done through my holding company, Clear Pines Hospitality Group. No red flags, no whispers. I kept the staff, upgraded the systems, improved their salaries, repaired the back-end operations that had been a mess for years. I didn't just buy the place, I made it better. I protected it. And still, they had no clue. Not even James. He never asked why I was flying so often, why I spent nights glued to spreadsheets. He assumed I was coding or designing something, and maybe that was the saddest part. That I had done all this, acquired something massive, and the man I married didn't think to ask. He's a good guy, but after 10 years, I stopped needing him to see me. I saw myself, that was enough. This year I showed up to the family vacation just like always, wore my same old navy sundress, let them assume nothing had changed. They pulled up in their leased luxury SUVs, flexed their new watches, talked about their Teslas like they'd invented electricity. James's brother saw me heading to the pool and said, "Hey Emma, can you grab some napkins from the kitchen on your way back?" I wasn't going that way, but I nodded and walked off, because the real power comes from knowing the moment before it hits. And I knew what was coming. The next night, the manager of the resort David was going to announce a change in ownership. Not a big press release, just a simple acknowledgement to the valued guests at the family's private dinner. And when he said my name, when he said the words, "Owned by Emma Thompson," it was going to hit like thunder on a clear sky. The morning of the reveal, the Thompsons were already complaining, as usual, lounging by the lake, sipping mimosas and tearing the place apart with their entitled little remarks. Lauren whined that the staff was slow. Sarah complained about the girl at check-in asking for ID. Robert muttered that the valet looked too young to trust with his car. Then Lauren dropped the line that made my stomach twist. "I miss when this place was family-owned. Now it's just another faceless corporation." James, without missing a beat, nodded and said, "Yeah, I heard it got bought by some holding company. Probably a tech firm. No soul anymore." I stared at him, stunned. That soulless corporation was me. I'd fixed the mold issues in the cabins. I'd upgraded the resort's filtration system. I had personally made sure the staff had better hours and paid sick leave. But none of it mattered to them, because they didn't know. And when they didn't know, I was still nothing. That night, we all gathered in the private dining room. It had been booked by Margaret, of course. White tablecloths, champagne glasses, overcooked steak and underseasoned salmon. And complaints. Always complaints. Lauren said the pool deck looked cheap. Michael said, "Some tech bro probably bought this place as a side project." James leaned over to me and whispered, "Maybe we should leave a review." I didn't say a word. I was too busy watching them dig their own hole. Then Margaret lifted her glass and said, "I just hope whoever bought this place understands that families like ours made it special. We're the reason this place is even worth something." That was the last straw. I excused myself, stepped out into the cool night air. My hands were shaking, not from fear, adrenaline. I called David. "Hey boss," he said, already knowing. "You ready?" I took a breath. "Do it, before dessert." Then I hung up. I let them sit in that room, surrounded by everything they didn't know I built, and I waited. I stood by the lake, wind brushing my face, the sound of the piano leaking out from the dining room. My heart was pounding in my chest. Because this wasn't just about real estate. It was about every time they looked through me, every time they mocked what I wore or questioned where I came from. It was about taking all of that, flipping it over, and standing tall. For once. For myself. I waited outside by the lake, the moonlight casting silver ripples across the water, until I heard David tap his glass. The gentle clink was soft, but it carried. The room quieted, just like we planned. I couldn't hear every word through the doors, but I didn't need to. I knew the script by heart. As part of our new ownership transition, we're honored to share that Clear Pines Hospitality Group has acquired full control of the resort. And tonight, we'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the new owner, Miss Emma Thompson. There was a pause thicker than silence, heavier than any sound. I walked in slowly, my heels hitting the floor with a rhythm that felt like a drumbeat. With each step, their eyes turned. Conversation stopped. Utensils froze mid-air. The air changed. Lauren dropped her fork, literally. It hit the floor with a sharp clink. Sarah's mouth opened like she'd forgotten how to close it. Margaret didn't even blink, her wineglass tilted in her hand, spilling a deep red stain across the crisp white tablecloth, and she didn't notice. Didn't even try to fix it. James looked at me like he'd never seen me before in his life. His eyebrows pinched, mouth barely moving. I didn't flinch. I walked straight to the middle of the room, calm, collected, and more powerful than I had ever felt. I looked right at James. "You wanted to leave a review?" I said, voice steady. "I'll forward it to myself." The shock hit him like a wave. You know that moment when a group realizes they've been trash-talking someone, and that person turns out to be their boss? Multiply that by 10. Then sprinkle it with rich people entitlement and a lifetime of thinking the world would always revolve around them. James's aunt coughed so hard on her lemon tart she nearly knocked over her chair. Michael's phone slipped from his hand, hit the floor, and stayed there. Someone near the back mumbled, "Wait, her?" Like I hadn't just walked through the door and taken their oxygen with me. But I wasn't done. I stepped toward the head of the table, Margaret's throne, the seat she always claimed first like it was hers by birthright. I reached for the mic David had set down beside the pianist, took it with one hand. Looked around slowly, carefully, at every face in that room. The same faces that had ignored me, talked over me, laughed behind my back. The same people who saw me as an accessory to James and nothing more. I smiled. "Don't worry," I said. "You're all still welcome here, just like everyone else now." I let that land. No more free upgrades, no more backdoor bookings, no more Thompson discounts. Their mouths moved, but no sound came out. I could almost see the math running through their heads, the bills they hadn't paid, the extras they'd always expected, the invisible power they thought they held here. I handed the mic back to the pianist, turned and walked out before anyone could fake a polite clap. In the hallway, everything was still. I pressed one hand to the wall and exhaled, really exhaled for the first time in what felt like years. And what I felt wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even pride. It was relief. Like a weight I'd carried for a decade had finally slid off my shoulders. For years, I'd been begging for space at their table. Smiling when they sneered, serving when they snubbed, trying so damn hard to be enough for people who never wanted to see me. But not anymore. That night, I didn't just show up. I didn't just speak. I didn't just exist. I claimed something. I stood in a room full of people who used to look through me, and they had to look up. I wasn't the maid anymore. I wasn't the outsider. I was the owner. And for the first time in my marriage, in this family, in this carefully staged vacation life, I was in control. I didn't need their invitations. I didn't need their fake warmth or their filtered praise. I didn't need them to say thank you. I didn't need James to explain me to them. I didn't need anyone at all. I owned the damn table, and I'd never sit quietly at the end of it again. The next morning, while they sipped mimosas and gossiped over croissants, I skipped their fancy brunch and walked the resort grounds with David. We checked on the new lakefront upgrades, talked timelines, reviewed staff feedback. The air smelled clean, fresh, like cedar and freedom. Staff nodded as I passed. A few guests waved, recognizing me from the announcement the night before. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Not as James's wife, not as the quiet girl with the napkins, but as someone who built something, owned something, stood for something. My phone buzzed. Lauren had texted me, "Hey, can we talk?" I stared at it for a second, then let the screen fade. She didn't want to talk. She wanted to spin. A few hours later, James knocked on my suite door. He looked small, like a kid who just got caught cheating on a test. "Emma, are you okay?" he asked. I looked at him for a long second before I answered. "You never asked," I said. "Not once. Not about what I do, why I work late, where I go, what I want." He blinked, confused. "I didn't think I needed to." "Exactly," I said. "I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I just let the silence do what it needed to do." And eventually he stepped back and let the door close. That evening there was a cocktail event for legacy guests, something Margaret insisted be held every year to honor family contributions. They were all there, pretending to be above it all, but I could hear the whispers. I could feel the curiosity. Who is she? Really? Is she serious? How'd she pull this off? I stepped onto the stage with a mic in hand. No announcement, no fanfare, just a quiet moment that cut through their noise. "Some of you know me," I began. "Some of you thought you knew me." A few nervous laughs rippled across the room. I clicked through slides of the resort's future new cabins, a wellness center, expanded docks for kayaking and boating, all fully funded by a new investment. The Thompson. I saw Margaret sit up straighter when I said the word Thompson, her brain already connecting dots that weren't hers to claim. Then I locked eyes with her. "It's named for my mom, Cecilia Thompson," I said. "She cleaned motel rooms for 16 years. She raised me by herself. She taught me that respect is earned, not inherited." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Margaret's smile twitched. Her eyes blinked faster, and then I dropped the real bomb. "Starting next season," I continued, "we'll be reviewing all family leases for compliance and renewal." The room shifted. They knew exactly what that meant. Uncle Robert's bargain basement cabin deal? Gone. Lauren's shady subletting scam? Over. Sarah's parents' private wing? On the chopping block. As I walked off stage, Michael tried to catch me with a weak, "Can we talk?" I gave him a smile and said, "Book an appointment through guest services." 3 days later, I sat on the dock at sunrise, hot coffee in hand, watching the lake reflect a sky so still it almost didn't look real. I was calm, like deep down in your bones calm. My inbox, though, was chaos. Robert begging to renegotiate his lease, Lauren sending a long, breathless voice memo about how it was all a misunderstanding, and Margaret, a voicemail so fake sweet I almost laughed. Emma, honey, this is getting dramatic. We're family, right? From the same woman who once suggested I take a posture class because engineers slouch. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. I was precise. My legal team had already started digging. Lauren had made over $40,000, 0 cents in unreported short-term rentals. That triggered a state audit. I gave Uncle Robert 30 days to vacate his cabin. Then I donated it to a non-profit that helps disabled veterans take nature retreats. Margaret tried to corner me in my office, said we needed to talk about appearances. Said I was hurting James. I slid an envelope across the table. Inside were photos, emails, and written statements from 3 employees she had harassed during past stays. I'd settled those cases quietly to protect the resort's reputation, but I looked her straight in the eye and said, I have a press release ready if you'd like to go public. She left, white-knuckled and shaking. James didn't fight me. He spiraled a little, asking himself questions he should have asked a decade ago. We had conversations, some angry, some sad, some so quiet it was hard to tell if we were still married or just sitting in the same room out of habit. One night I told him, I didn't stay to be accepted. I stayed, hoping you'd see me. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I finished my tea, turned out the light, and went to bed. A month later he moved out. We're not enemies, we're not friends, we're just done, and that hurt less than I thought it would. Because in the end, I got back everything they tried to shrink in me. Every word they ignored, every look they dismissed, every name they didn't bother to learn. The quiet girl who made the salad, the one they called sweet but basic, she runs the show now, and no one gets to talk down to her ever again. Closure isn't always someone saying I'm sorry. Sometimes it's standing in the center of the room and knowing no one can ignore you anymore. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's a signed deed. But the best kind of closure? It's power. Quiet. Earned. Unbreakable. If you've ever been pushed aside in your own story, tell me in the comments how you flipped the script. And if this hit home, you know where the subscribe button is.